How's it going, everybody? My name's Jackson, but most of you know me as CS2TACTICS, and welcome back to the Refrag Academy. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to properly anchor the B site on Mirage. Nobody likes jump spotting apps the entire game, but hey, if you get stuck doing it, you want to make sure that you're doing a good job, because there's nothing worse than not getting much action for most of the game, and once you finally do get it, you end up fumbling the bag for your team. So today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to do it a little bit better. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with what I consider to be the most standard, most common opening that you're going to see out of a B anchor, which is going to be just a regular Molly HE opening, where they're going to go up back against this wall, they're going to get this entire window in view, they're going to go just below this dark spot here, above the window frame, and do a run, throw, and release before they hit this wall. Anytime before that wall, it's generally going to hit just fine. As you can see, this Molly is going to end up popping right here, covering off the doorway, all the way up to this far wall. So, as you can see, anyone that pushes through here is either going to be trapped in kitchen or stuck up front. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that this Molly is not going to be stopping any sort of rush. The best timing spawn for the T's can actually beat this thing. However, if you have a cat player, the first thing they should be doing is going up against this wall and listening for anyone running up through here. And if they hear that, you may be able to react in time if it's calmed properly, to instead of throwing this Molly right off the jump, you can maybe just bank it off of this window frame to where you're going to Molly off this area, where by the time they reach it, it's at full tick, and they're not going to be able to jump out the window or push out to enter you without taking a decent amount of damage. Now, if the T's have been extremely aggressive towards apps, it may be a better idea to just Molly it off right off the jump. And a lot of times in pugs, you'll have cat players almost every single round Mollying this off. Now, make sure, if they're going to be doing it, that they're not just lazily throwing a Molly right out here towards the middle of apps, because that does happen from time to time, but it allows these little walls here on the outside of this doorway for T's to get set up in, and then take surprising fights on you as you're jump spotting or holding an angle. That's just something that you're going to have to worry about, so might as well make sure when your teammates are throwing a Molly, they're throwing it as far to the right as they possibly can, where it's going to end up catching all of these positions around the corner. Now, honestly, I do think it's a waste to have a teammate early Molly this every single round. The amount of B rushes, especially at higher elos, are pretty few and far between. So again, as I've already stated, the most common opening is going to be this Molly right here. Now, after the pros are throwing this Molly, there's one of two things that they often do. If they think there is a chance that someone's actually moved up into this position, to try to catch them on their way up here, oftentimes, right after they throw this Molly, they'll find this little corner of the door and do a nice little step throw with an HE to just demolish anyone that's on their way up into one of these corner pockets. Now, of course, sometimes, if they don't expect anyone to have pushed through, they'll omit that first HE and instead just jump spot for a little bit. And once they end up noticing that, hey, this Molly is starting to fade, they'll throw a nice juicy HE as deep into here as they can to try to catch anyone that's cheating up and moving up in front of that Molly right after it fades to catch them for some significant damage. Now, as far as opening phase utility is concerned, we've pretty much covered most of the basics. Now you're kind of onto the point where we consider this to be the most boring job in all of Counter-Strike, and that is jump spotting B apps. That is just what you're going to be doing for a lot of the time, unfortunately, as a B anchor, and understanding how to do that properly is fairly important. One thing you don't want to be doing is just jumping right here, to where you have the entirety of your body exposed for the full extent of the jump, all the way up to the apex. In this situation, if there's any decently skilled T, they're going to be able to kill you as you do that. So you want to make sure you're doing it on the run, and generally what I like to do is I like to jump way early. That way I'm only spotting on my downfall. That way they're only catching a slight glimpse. It's going to be a much harder shot to hit. In lower elo, a lot of times you're not going to get punished for that, but as you work your way up the ranks, people are going to start hitting those shots, which is absolutely terrifying. But again, just as a general rule of thumb, you just want to make sure the least amount of your body is exposed while you're still getting valuable information. I see pros do it all sorts of different ways. Some of them are jumping on this far side. Some of them are just jumping late like this. Either way, they're just trying to make it hard because, again, if you're jumping vertically, you're probably going to get punished by good players. Or if you're really struggling with that jump spot, say someone's just really hitting the shots, you can actually jump spot from back here and look through apps like this. Maybe if you suspect there may be an opper in a position that's just going to try to catch you, it may be a better idea to go back here and jump spot this way to see if they're coming up just looking through the windows. This is less information, but it's way safer because if you see someone, you're already in cover, you're already in position to start fighting. So now you may be asking, well, why are we even jump spotting? And the reason is so that you have enough time to get set up and not be in a one and done position. And by one and done position, I mean, you know, crouching up under van here. Again, at lower elos, sometimes you can get a 3K from a position like this. But when you're playing against good opponents, they're going to either clear this or they're going to trade you after one kill. You're going to be one and done, and your teammates are going to be in a 4 versus 4 bomb down B site. Pretty difficult, right? So what I would recommend doing is instead of just trying to crouch up here and hold the line right at the, as there's water falling over your face, what I would recommend doing is the second you end up spotting someone off the jump spot, if you see them, you can then just bank a smoke right off the back of this wall and play back behind this defensive smoke. And the reason I like playing back here is because you can play in this position, and anytime, this is what's so crazy about this, anytime that the T's are actually going to be able to peek you, unless they run through the smoke like a maniac, let's say they come through here towards the middle of sight to peek you. You're playing right here towards this van, and for them to actually swing out and fully clear you, they're going to be exposed to any players that you have here on cat, so they can help out. They're going to be exposed to any players that you have on window as well, so they're going to be able to help out. So just like that, you have an almost triple crossfire, so anyone that tries to peek you, they're going to get put in the blender. And for playing in pugs and stuff like that, it's not, it's pretty difficult to get your teammates to play in proper crossfires, but with this position right here, I mean, you're just going to have teammates naturally going here. People are going to be rotating from cat. So just like that, you may have a natural crossfire. Or hey, your window player, hearing all the commotion, might be coming up here already just ready to help out with the crossfire. Nothing organized, nothing structured, but it may just work out to where you just put the T's into a blender as they try to clear you out. All right, so let's go ahead and get started by looking at a little bit of professional player examples. Mezzi is generally the B anchor for Vitality. So as you can see here, he's going to end up throwing that early incendiary, and he's just going to stand on the bumper of the van and just take this early peek to make sure that no one's running up through it. Now, what he's going to end up doing is, as the Smolly fades, he's thinking about throwing an HE here, but he does end up deciding to throw a flash instead. And if you'll notice here, if he'd thrown that HE, it would have destroyed Adam, probably for 30 plus damage. He decides to throw a flash and then immediately follow that up with an HE, as you can see here. And it's going to do a little bit less damage since Adam's already deep here in kitchen, but it definitely had the potential to do a lot more. 15 isn't terrible. He could definitely get a one-shot with that A1S now, but overall, I'm sure he would have liked a little bit more. But now he's just going to do a little bit of jump spotting, as we discussed. He's just not showing too much of his body all at once, and he ends up spotting Adam. He's going to go back, throw a defensive smoke, and just like that, he's in a position to where for them to actually peek and kill him, they would have to run through a crossfire between him and Robs. So notice how Robs is moving up here to try to help him out. Robs actually peeks up, gets a kill here into this jail position. And now Mezzi, since he has Robs there, is thinking, all right, you know what? I'm safe. I can actually peek up over here and bring down Isaac. Now, for some reason, Robs decided to run back to mid. I'm not sure if that's a mistake from Robs or if the information they're getting in con is a little bit different. Maybe they're hearing Plopsky. I don't know. But unfortunately for Mezzi here, Robs does kind of leave him out to dry. I'm sure there was a bit of a miscommunication there. Again, new protocols. It's a brand new team for Robs, so who knows what was going on there. Seemed like a weird decision to me, but overall, I think Mezzi did everything exactly right. He threw his incendiary, he threw his HE, he dropped a defensive smoke, and they end up getting 2 kills off the back of that defensive smoke. And hey, guess what? They're in a man advantage, and Vitality end up going on to winning this round, no problem at all. And hey, if you thought I was kidding about the pros throwing this all the time, here's an example of Kerrigan throwing pretty much that exact same molly that you saw Mezzi throw. As you can see, back against the wall, and just like that, he's thrown that same variation that's going to end up landing right here in the doorway, completely burning all of this area out. And finally, we'll look at one more example where you're going to have Snacks as the B anchor for G2 going up in front of this pillar. He's going to throw that same molly. It's just a little bit differently. It should still land no problem all the way up here and block off that little entrance. I think in this case there's a slight gap, but either way, Snacks has thrown a similar purposed molly, throws himself an extra smoke up here, and is going to immediately throw that HE grenade right as this molly is fading. And guess what? It's going to do tremendous damage onto both Donk and Zontix. And as you can see here, since Snacks has 2 smokes, he's going to be a little bit more liberal with his use. He throws one down here, and guess what? Picks up the second, throws another smoke down, just creating a gigantic wall. Very crazy play. Ends up peeking out of the smoke, doing more damage, and running back. Snacks is definitely getting crazy with his MP9, trying to catch them off guard. Yeah, they decided to say, you know what? I'm actually not going to try this. Spirit just tuck tail and run straight out of abs. So now that we've talked about a lot of the opening utility, let's talk about some opening plays you can go for. A lot of times your opper may want to go for an early peek down this lane here in abs. So one thing that you can do is actually run up here just over this bump, and you can end up just standing here, and your opper we'll just pick up an op just for demonstration purposes. You can actually just jump right on top of your head with a crouch jump and then just jump right up here. It's one of the fastest ways they can possibly get up here, and boom, they're in position for a very surprising peek. Or hey, if you want to go for that early peek and you don't have a teammate to boost you, you can always just do the van jump. I'm not the best movement player, but the way I usually do this is by just jumping up here on top of the van, then crouch jumping up on top of this position, all in one semi-fluid motion. There are people that are a lot better and faster than me at it, but hey, that's how I generally go about doing it. Or hey, you could also practice it in Refrag's newer momentum mode, which is also really fun to play and learn other skill jumps all around the map. Now there's also some pretty cool movement tricks where you can straight jump onto the inside of this window and take some other surprising peeks, but again, that's all for a different video. Now, one more pretty cool piece of utility, if you were a teammate to set up in a position like this, right? If you have a teammate or yourself go into this corner, you can do a simple left click at the top of this little line for a devastating flash on any of the players here in apps. As you can see here, no matter what side you're on, you can have a teammate just peek right off this thing, and boom, they have blind enemies back here without really any reaction time whatsoever. Now here's an example where Kerrigan's running up the site. He's going to end up throwing a more shallow molly, but since there's a little bit going on in mid, he's actually going to throw a super high flash that should land over on top of this building and blind anyone that's going up on Cat. Now, the fight is pretty much already over by this point, but if it was still going on, you can probably see how good of an effect that would have had. Now, being able to flash for your mid players is pretty important. A lot of times you'll see pros playing from an angle right here. They'll do a W jump throw at this black mark, and that's going to be a nice little flash to full blind anyone here on Cat. And it's really easy for your Cat players to end up peeking off of and just destroying anyone out here on this position. You can also throw it back from empty, where you can just aim a little bit higher, generally around the shadow here, and you just want to make sure you're not hitting that wall. It's just somewhere around here, run jump throw, and boom, that should also hit just fine. So now let's talk about the late round. We're going to talk about crossfires, then also kind of what to do if you're solo anchoring once you're out of utility. Now, sometimes you're going to end up jump spotting. You're going to see someone, maybe even deploying. You've done everything right. You've deployed your smoke, and they actually don't come out. It was just a lurker that you spotted, and you just kind of got a little bit startled, and boom, now you're out of utility. There's all sorts of crazy angles that you can play. One that I see very often in the pro scene is they'll jump up on top of bench here, and they'll peek out like off this little side angle to where they can see into here. That's a very surprising off angle, as you can see. If the T's are coming up here, they may not be expecting you to be on that position right there. So it's a pretty solid one. You can definitely catch some people off guard with that. Works best with an op, but you know, if you've got hot aim, you may be able to do it with a rifle. Now, another thing is if you have a teammate boost you up on top of these boxes, back in CSGO, you could make the jump. I don't believe you're able to anymore, but this is a very powerful angle, is being up here where you can spot jail. A lot of times in lower levels, you'll see people getting boosted up here. I just think it's not the best. Once in a blue moon, it may be a good idea to change it up, maybe if you're on an eco or something like that. But overall, I wouldn't really spend the resources on boosting up here. This position is still worth it because you get a decent amount of info while you're up here looking towards jail. That's at least my 2 cents on these 2 boost up positions. All right, so let's talk about some late round setups that are just really good crossfires to get into for whenever you're maybe low on utility or just expecting them to end on a specific site. So if you have help on B, one of my personal favorite setups is the one you have Ultimate and Naf in right now. You've got Naf sitting here under balcony, watching all the way over here towards Cat, and you have Ultimate who's watching through sight all the way through the window. As you can see, this is a really good setup. And you're gonna notice here that Ultimate is just completely locked in here and takes a very easy shot right here onto X-Floud. Now, what I want you to notice here is how Naf has not moved a muscle. He's still completely locked in here, hoping that someone is going to end up just walking into his crosshair out of Cat. He is absolutely putting 100% faith here into Ultimate, where Ultimate, after that shot, is going to reposition and just make sure they're not going to drop on top of balcony. He's holding here. It's worth mentioning also that LNZ is smart. He understands that Naf could be holding that angle, so he ends up playing super close to this wall to avoid, you know, kind of undisciplined movement and just getting, you know, freebie killed by Naf. Sometimes in pugs, you're going to have people that are just going to peek out way too wide and give you a free kill on that line. So just interesting to mention, smart play by LNZ for not giving him that line of sight. But a little bit of utility is going to start coming in. It's going to force Naf off the angle, where he's then going to have to start worrying about balcony. And immediately, the response from Ultimate is to start watching Cat. This is great team play and the ability to just kind of reverse what you're holding in the crossfire. So now you have Naf, who's taking this fight. He's going to end up backing up, right, and doing a little bit of damage onto Tanir. He also is going to bring down some Pius, as well as Tanir, and then of course we have Ultimate, who is going to bring down LNZ, and just like that, all 5 kills across these 2 players that are set up in a really nice setup, to where they can cover each other, and, you know, if one player starts to get overrun, the other can help out. A solid crossfire. So here's an example from Team Spirit, where you have Magix, and Zontix. They're in a 4 versus 5 versus Heroic, and they're going to end up going into a very interesting setup. This is something they kind of do late round, last second, but Zontix has decided, you know what, we're in a man disadvantage. I'm actually going to pull back towards this get right position and give up this cat peek. And Magix has been playing, he's actually burned through all of his utility already, trying to keep them at bay, and has decided, you know what, I'm going to move back here towards the back of site, and we're going to play a little bit more of a passive setup, right? So let's take a look at how they go about doing this. So it also is probably a really good feeling as a B anchor to have Donk on the other side of the map that is just going to be able to shred people left, right, and center. So that's just besides the point. Anyways, you have Magix who's holding balcony, and then you have Zontix who's set up here to watch the drop. But there's kind of one flaw with the setup. If someone peeks really close and stays really far along this wall, similar to what we saw LNZ doing in the last little setup we saw, they could actually get a peek onto Zontix without Magix really being able to do anything about it and trade. And at the same time, they could also peek super deep in here and get a line of sight onto Magix this way. So this is probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable for them once they start to feel pressure. And so you're actually going to see Magix take a little bit of a risk to move back here and end up picking up this side of empty to where A, he can help out with that drop. As you can see, he's going to do damage onto Kixen. And then Zontix is also able to just peek out and get a very free kill. At the same time, now he's not exposed to anyone peeking here. And as you can see, Dexter is actually keeping really close along this line to eventually peek Zontix, but Magix is able to immediately walk out here and catch Dexter, who's fighting Zontix here. Really beautiful team play here, making sure they understand what they need to do in order to prevent anything. And just, again, Magix peeks out. They're both fighting the same player. This is just great teamwork between the two B players here, and something you can definitely learn from, just making sure that no one is getting shot in the back of the head without the support of the teammate. Alright guys, so as always, I definitely recommend hopping into different modes like Refrag, Defender, Crossfire, Pre-Fire, all of that, just to get a feel for where common positions are and how different fights are going to end up playing out. But overall, that is pretty much an overview of everything I think you should know to get started in playing and improving when it comes to anchoring the B site on Mirage. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, feel free to check out all of the others on the Refrag Academy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.